Well, this book is for my mother, who should have been a lesbian, and for my daughter, in hopes that she will be. It seems quite an outrageous epigraph, is it not? It seems that way. Lesbian Nation is the book by Jill Johnston. Well, quite obviously, the much overused word controversial applies, but it's provocative. I like the word provocative. It is that. She provokes, quite obviously. Anyway, and quite marvelously, I think, too. Though I disagree with her, of course, on many matters. Say I. This is my way of saying...
It's your way of saying you're a man.
Way of saying I'm a man, of course. At the same time, knowing full well that a great deal of what she says is bone-deep truth.
I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History. One of the things I love about mining the Studs Terkel radio archive is the time travel, the chance to go back decades and hear the voices of people I'd only read about, like Lorraine Hansberry and Christopher Isherwood, or the stories of people who are long forgotten, like female impersonator Les Lee. I also enjoy listening to Studs Terkel, his curiosity, his proudly lefty opinions, and the way he connected with the people sitting across from him. But sometimes that was a struggle, as you'll hear in his early 1970s interview with lesbian feminist separatist Jill Johnston. Jill Johnston was born in London in 1929 to an American nurse and an English bell maker. Her father left the picture soon after Jill was born. She was raised by her mother and grandmother in Queens, New York. In 1959, Jill started writing for the alternative downtown newspaper, The Village Voice. She began as a dance critic and later moved on to writing more personal columns, where she embraced all things avant-garde and countercultural. A year after the Stonewall Uprising, Jill came out in print as a lesbian. Her focus shifted from the cultural to the political, and she began advocating for a complete break from men and their institutions. She got a lot of attention for pronouncements like, "All women are lesbians except those who don't know it yet." But there was more to Jill than just her talent for provocation. Her work was welcomed by women who felt sidelined both in the male-dominated gay liberation movement and the feminist movement, which was often hostile to lesbians. Even at a time when radical thought was widespread, Jill's views pushed the envelope and pushed Studs Terkel's buttons when he interviewed Jill about her book, Lesbian Nation. Let's join the two of them as they lock horns in a conversation first broadcast on June 29th, 1973.
There's something I want to ask you about, not challenge you, but just wonder about. You say that a woman is not free liberated unless she's a lesbian. Now, isn't this kind of fascistic on your part?
Well, it's the use of the word fascistic.
No, you know why I say this? I'm saying when you say no woman
Yeah.
can be a free woman unless she's lesbian, aren't you denying people the right to be what they are, no matter what?
Well, we as women, as you know, there is a feminist movement, and women have been denied the right to be what they are.
I agree. I agree with that.
We have to start with beginnings. It depends how you're defining lesbian. You see, I have a political definition of lesbianism, and what it really means is self-commitment. And we know that we have a feminist movement because women have been denied self-commitment. And we're just updating feminism by calling it lesbianism because we feel that total commitment to ourselves would include every phase of our activities.
I see. You're using the word
bonding
then,
of women.
using the word lesbian in a much broader sense.
Oh,
then.
yes, sure.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, that's perhaps it should be made clear. I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why this book is a
Yeah.
political book, basically.
Yeah. As a result of which, sometimes your stuff seems outrageous, but it's almost deliberate. I mean, isn't that the point? That is to outrage, to disturb.
Well, it's a funny thing, I just say what I'm into.
Yeah.
I don't set out to outrage. It seems that where I'm at is not. It does tend to be outrageous.
And perhaps we could talk about that. Reactions to you when you appear publicly. I'm not talking about the inner circles of New York or Village. I'm talking about outside, west of the Hudson, when you appear. What is the first reaction?
There's a great range, from dummies to smarties and people in yellow dresses and heels and stockings and girdles to
But you're not calling them dummies, though, are you?
Yeah.
Girls in yellow dresses, why?
Well, I had this experience in Seattle recently. A woman in a yellow dress, just like that, who just stopped me before I got on. You know,
Yeah,
she took a look at my boots, and she signaled the director to cut our time in half, and she was extremely hostile.
Well,
She really, you know,
now-
it's
now-
just acting as a censor.
Yeah. Now, what do you think made her do that? Fear.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I think it's the way the culture has brought us all up, you know, and it's in the last decade or so that with psychedelics and people's heads have opened up more, and they're more accepting, if not just tolerant, of all different ways of behaving. America hasn't been noted for its tolerance of just eccentricity, people who are eccentric.
People who are different. Yeah.
Yeah, just because they wear checkered hats or something.
But how did it begin? Yourself, your consciousness, your awareness that, say, you were a lesbian. A lesbian now in the sexual
Yeah.
sense, you know.
Well, I was born a lesbian, you know. I suppose all men are lesbians too, from that point of view. It's all men came out of their mothers.
Yeah.
Our first great sexual experience was with our mothers. And I think that all sexual experience afterwards is a recreation of that experience. And so from that point of view, it's a perversion for women to sleep with men or to be invaded by men. I think that that women as well as men want to recreate their original unity with their mothers.
Isn't this, forgive me, see, you have your right. Aren't you denying what is the natural impulses of people, each of whom is different and unique? Aren't you denying that right? You say it's a perversion for a woman to sleep with a man. You see,
Well,
that isn't that an individual
well,
matter?
we live in a culture, and by definition, a culture is a perversion of nature.
Well, I don't keep going. I don't quite. You lost me there.
Well, you see, when you say natural instincts, we don't know too much what our natural instincts are by this time in history, because we have been so diverted by cultural conditionings of all of us have been so heavily conditioned. And so I think my book is a story of growing up as a conditioned person who was instinctively at odds with the social forces around me, and not knowing that. You see, I was just a naturally acculturated female, although I had certain advantages as a female. I didn't have a father or brother, and this permitted me more mobility. You know, I wasn't stuck in a girdle as soon as I was born or anything. I was very athletic and what they would call a tomboy or something. And then I became intellectually curious, and so I was mentally mobile too. And I found that all of this mobility was in opposition to the social forces of the male world, which tends to prohibit women from this mobility at every turn. But I didn't know that this was happening, so this threw me into conflict with my culture. And so that I think that my emergence as an outrageous person is really a recovery of my original mobility, if you will, you know, and a reassertion of that, and the advantage that I experienced as a child.
Yeah.
I think that that which has passed between a woman's legs has gotten out of her control. That seems to me a pretty
That's
basic
very
way of
interesting.
putting it.
Yeah. So she produced. It was a mutual production, though, wasn't it?
I don't know. We don't know how,
I mean, could have been
how
produced.
it all came
I mean,
about.
there was a seed. You see, where'd the seed come from?
Well, of course, we might have been closer to parthenogenetic types of animals. We don't know how this interdependent reproductive process emerged. We really don't want to be dependent on another creature for our reproduction. I don't think psychically that we want to, and I think this is the tragedy of animals that are divided into two sexes, you see.
You know, aren't you talking about something else? We hear the overused word alienation, yet we know there's a truth to it. People remove one from the other. Aren't you talking going a step further in removal? Person being uniquely, not so, autonomy by all means beautiful, but you're talking now about removal from another person entirely when you speak of a parthenogenic.
Well, autonomy does tend to mean that. Does tend to mean removal.
Autonomy to me means control of self.
Or it means, yes, control of self, and control of self would mean bonding with your peer group. see.
What about bonding with other groups? Isn't this what the hope, the salvation of the human race
You
would
mean
be?
separate but equal or something?
No.
I
You're
don't
putting words in my mouth.
I don't know.
Now, I think
I don't know what you mean exactly.
I'm talking the fact that you say it's a perversion for women to sleep with men. I'm talking now about the natural impulses of each individual to be lesbian woman, to be a homosexual guy, or to be a heterosexual man or woman. And you're right, of course, it's a heterosexually dominated society.
Yes.
A world, I agree. But let both, or let all 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever dimensions they may be, flower.
Yes, but we're now engaged in revolution. You're talking in a post-revolutionary sense.
But you are thinking, but don't you have to think in that sense too? In other words, you are taking what would be an extremely militant position deliberately, and the outrage is necessary. But you don't see this as the end. That's what I meant. I was assuming that you see this as the ultimate destiny of
Well,
humans.
just speaking and thinking of the end is a kind of a desultory exercise. It's it's a fantasy. Why we're engaged in the immediate now. If we did live in a liberated society, as some utopian idea, just engaging in heterosexual sex for a woman would not necessarily mean being oppressed, or, But I think you have to separate the notion of the actual activity from the institution which lies behind the activity. And so we are defining ourselves as a class. The class of men oppresses the class of women, and the institution through which they do that is the heterosexual institution.
But you also, do you have a child?
Yeah, 2 children.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Yeah, well, I succumbed to the male corporation. I did what normal women are supposed to do, and I got married. So I was married for 3 or 4 years.
Was that rough?
It wasn't very nice. My line about that is that my marriage was an exercise in violence interrupted by short periods of violence.
Are you sorry you had the children?
Well, I couldn't say I was sorry. I'm not sorry about anything. I'd only say that I'm quite certain if I knew better then, I probably wouldn't have had children, if I had been politically aware, because for what it is for a woman to have child in society now without our communal child care centers and so forth, it's an impossible situation.
Well, of
it's
course.
a sacrificial action, and we are now, I think, directed towards non-sacrifice as women.
But isn't there something else? Of course, obviously, we're in agreement. There's no about child care centers and the rights of women and mothers. Mothers, I said. So what about your 2? I don't mean to be too personal, so stop me. What about your 2 children? Your thoughts and their thoughts?
I don't think about it much.
Do you see them?
Not much.
I'm back to the theme. There are now millions of lonely, alienated people living behind the billboards, non-celebrated. Homosexuals, lesbians, heterosexuals. How is the lot of these people to be endured and improved? How, in our society?
Well, you can't have a socialist revolution without a woman's revolution. I mean, the people at the bottom of the heap are women. When people bring up human liberation, I say, well, are we talking about feminism or not? See, feminism is about women.
We're talking about feminism plus.
Well, I'm talking about feminism because I'm involved in a partisan movement, because I'm involved in the movement that most directly concerns me. I never thought I'd get into a social trip,
Where's that?
Well, I was so much on the artist trip and the mystical religious artist trip.
Yeah, that might be worth, during the time remaining, perhaps, how did that shift occur? You were an artist in your Greenwich Village, and when did the political and social
Well, I was 69, really, basically, 1969. There was all that feminism around already for 2 or 3 years or more, and I just had glimmerings of it, heard a little bit, sifted in a bit. I think the way I came to it was that I was, by that time, an angry lesbian. I was pretty certain that by this time I was being discriminated against, if not as a woman, at least as a lesbian. That had become increasingly clear. So I had by this time a personal, confessional, sort of autobiographical column So I was beginning to come out, and then all of a sudden there was the conjunction of me and my anger in my life with the Gay Liberation Front, and that threw me into my first kind of consciousness of myself as a political person. So then I gradually, over a period of 2 years, by 1971, I would say I had read enough basic feminist literature to put the two things together. And then the problem seemed to me to articulate a lesbian feminist position. It was very clear. I couldn't separate myself at some point. Being a lesbian, being a woman was all the same thing to me. See.
But you see,
it means being a woman, identify woman.
But you see, your condition, though, is connected with the condition of others. That now, aside from.
Oh yeah, I started to go to those indignation meetings, right?
Yeah.
Right. I went to a few of those, and I could see these people were angry, and at first they were the other to me. How something
who's
is
the they
different.
you're talking about now?
Well, these women at women and men at Gay Liberation Front meetings, everybody yelling and carrying on and really angry, and they didn't represent me at that time. They were still the other freaky people, because I wasn't who I was.
And I'm going a step beyond. Now, did you become interested in other matters, too, outside of gay liberation?
Well,
gay life?
that of course then stimulated my a latent interest in Marxism and socialist thinking.
I'm thinking also anti-war protests, etc.
No, I never got into that. I think that's a man's game.
How come?
Peace demonstrations
Well,
and
tell
all
me
that
about
stuff.
that.
I never went to one of those.
We're on to something now. Wait, just a minute now. So you don't see anti-war sentiments expressed in coalition and group as being anything to do with women's liberation?
Well, yes, but I mean, to just get into anti-war demonstrations with men is to participate in the man's war against men, and just to say I'm against war seems to be very simple-minded. It's so simple-minded.
No, how? And you didn't take part. I'm not being
feminism,
righteous now. I'm not talking.
yes.
I'm talking now about the killing of women and children,
Yes.
and attempts to stop the killing of women and children.
Yes.
Do you think that's not your...
because as long as we live in a man's culture, men will go on killing women and children. So what we are doing is we're working on a woman's culture to stop this.
No, wait, how are you?
You
so
can't.
I'm talking about
you
direct
can't,
stopping of a bombing of Cambodian villages right now.
Well, if they don't do it there, they'll do it someplace else. As long as we have men in the government, they're going to continue doing that.
You know what? I hate to say this. If this is your approach, Nixon has nothing to worry about.
That's been my position all along.
No,
because Nixon is just one guy.
Now, I'm saying that if your
Nixon
approach were the
represents
approach of all women,
Nixon
he has nothing to
represents
worry
the
about.
American people, and the American people are basically men. Nixon is no big deal. He's just like all the other guys.
No, I'm saying something else.
Oh, excuse me.
I'm condemning you.
Yes.
I'm saying that if this was your approach about the anti-war demonstrations and the stopping, involving men as well as women.
Well, I have to use a metaphor to explain what I mean.
Yeah.
That is, you have, let's say you have a tower made of blocks, and supposing the inside of this tower is rotten, and feminism is working at the bottom of this rotten tower. And until woman's culture and until feminism and the female principle has more leverage in the world at large, they're going to go on having this rotten tower, and women and children are killed in the homes. Never mind Cambodia.
Both.
Women and children.
Why not?
It's the killing in Cambodia is a reflection of the killing of women and children in the homes. It's just a reflection.
I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
I'm really saying that metaphor or no metaphor, of course the tower has to be rebuilt. But in the meantime, there are human lives involved. In the home, of course, as well as in Cambodia.
I know, but if I diverted all of my time into stopping the bombing in Cambodia, then I wouldn't have time to work on the real basics.
It's obvious that Jill Johnston and I are just beginning our conversation. We'll call this an open-end close. I find that it's narrow. I mean, much as I admire your position, I think it's narrow in that it does not include the other. There has to be cooperation with this other species called man, too.
Well, women have cooperated with men for a long time.
Any other thing you feel like saying?
Pardon?
Anything you feel like saying as we're saying
well, I
goodbye
think you'll see that in the end you'll see that we're right, that this is the really broad approach to the world's problems.
One of them. Jill Johnston, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Jill Johnston remained committed to the feminist cause, although she later came to refer to her book Lesbian Nation as a period piece. She continued to write as a cultural critic and about her own life. Her final book was a biography of the father she never knew. In 1993, Jill married her longtime partner Ingrid Newbow in Denmark. The couple married again in Connecticut a year before Jill's death on September 18, 2010. She was 81. Many thanks to everyone who makes Making Gay History possible. Senior producer Nahani Rouse, co-producer and deputy director Inga Dataya, researcher Brian Faree, photo editor Michael Green, genealogist Michael Leclerc, and our social media team, Christiana Pena, Nick Porter, and Denio Lorenko. Special thanks to our guardian angel, Jenna Weiss-Berman, and our founding editor and producer, Sarah Birmingham. Our theme music was composed by Fritz Myers. Making Gay History is a co-production of Pineapple Street Studios, with assistance from the New York Public Library's Manuscripts and Archives Division and the One Archives at the USC Libraries. Season 8 of this podcast is produced in association with the Studs Terkel Radio Archive, which is managed by WFMT in partnership with the Chicago History Museum. A very special thank you to Allison Shine Holmes, Director of Media Archives at WTTW Chicago PBS and WFMT Chicago, for giving us access to Studs Terkel's treasure trove of interviews. You can find many of them at studsterkel.wfmt.com. Season 8 of this podcast has been made possible with funding from the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, proud Chicagoans Barbara Levy-Kipper and Irwin and Andrew Press, and our listeners, including Van and Tina Vandewater and Hal Brody and Don Smith. Thanks, Van and Tina. Thanks, Hal and Don. If you're not already a subscriber to our newsletter, sign up so you're the first to know what we've got coming up. You can do that at makinggayhistory.com. Our website is also where you'll find previous episodes, archival photos, full transcripts, and additional information on each of the people and stories we feature. So long, until next time.